This semester is our first stat cafe. We're continuing our stat cafe tradition, and our first speaker this semester will be Dr. Carroll. I'm pretty sure everyone knows it, but I will give still a little introduction. Very little, because if I tell everything about Dr. Carroll, it will take hours to finish. So Dr. Carroll is a distinguished professor of statistics, nutrition, and psychology at Texas A&M University. He received his PhD in 1974 from the Department of Statistics at Purdue University. Dr. Carroll has been awarded most of the major honors in statistics, including the Committee of President's Award, Fisher Award, and many, many more. Dr. Carroll has made fundamental contributions in many areas of statistical methodology and practice, such as measurement error models, non-parametric, semi-parametric regression, nutrition, and genetic epidemiology. Dr. Carroll gave 424 technical talks and wrote 496 papers. And we are very glad to open the semester stat cafe with Dr. Carroll talk. It will not be technical, but I'm pretty sure you will get a lot of very useful insights for your future work and maybe your future life. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. Well, yeah, that's me. 496, not bad, hey? No. Well, okay, this is an award talk I gave at the University of Michigan in the fall of last year. I won something called the Jeremy Taylor Mentoring Award there. And they gave me $1,000 and flew me first class. So that was okay. That was nice. And so I'm going to talk about mentoring, what I do, what I've done. And I think everybody knows I'm a pretty informal person. And so if you want to interrupt me and ask me questions during the talk or afterwards, fine with me. I mean, I have no place to go. So I'm just sitting here. I do sit down because of my back, which is really terrible. And so I can't actually stand up straight for any long period of time. So don't think I'm being too informal. It's just I'm trying to protect my back. Okay. So I've got basically three kind of things. And I'll also answer other questions about me and my life. For those of you who don't know, I grew up everywhere. I was born in Japan, moved to the DC area, District of Columbia area. Moved to, where else did we go? Oh, we went to Wichita Falls here in Texas. Then we went to Germany. Then we went back to Wichita Falls. Then we went to Omaha. Then we went back to Wichita Falls, and then my father retired. So I claim I'm a Texan, but I won't claim, and I should be. I've spent most of my life here, by far the majority of it. But yeah, so, and I've been here 37 years and really, really like the place, like living here. My wife is a native Texan, and she was born in Dallas. We've been married for 52 years now, which is not bad. Okay, so these are sort of the topics. Okay. First of all, I'm going to talk about, well, who do I mentor? Now, this thing is the types that I've mentored. That little black thing there is hiding the titles. Yeah, but this is the types of people. That's not a big deal. Okay. So I've had my own graduate students. I've had my own postdocs. And I've mentored other people's students and postdocs, including some pretty famous students at places. And I've mentored a bunch of younger researchers who I know very well and have liked and have remained good friends with. And okay, I'm not touching anything here. Don't worry, I teach distance courses. There we go. But I learned very early in the game not to let me touch anything. And because the first time I tried, I gave a wonderful lecture. You know, when you give a talk, sometimes you know it's crummy, and sometimes you know it's just absolutely fantastic. And this one was one that was so fantastic, and I really loved it. And then I screwed up saving the class. So, okay. So I've had 48 graduating students. 20 of them are in academics, which is about the right portion. 11 are ASA fellows, which is pretty good. Some people are, I've had some, in other words, I've had some really good students. 5 of those 11, or 5 of the 48, well, it's 5 of the 11 too, have been university department heads. And one, Marie Davidian, was the American Statistical Association president and is the coordinating editor for biometrics. And so I like to think I was responsible for their success, but I'm smart enough to know that that's not true. They're smart. They've been really, so I've been really fortunate and great students. Almost all of them, they're all smart. Almost all of them have been motivated. And that's for me, it's the most important thing. If the student's motivated and they want to write a dissertation with me, oh, they'll write a good dissertation. It doesn't, I mean, a really good dissertation because they're motivated. I know enough stuff to give them good problems. I mean, that's what I do. But if you're motivated, you shouldn't worry about whether you do theory or applications or et cetera. You can still write a great dissertation. So I have a poster boy for this, Alex Asher, who's now at Stata. And his thesis appeared in Biometrica, of all things. And so it's just smart. Motivated is all it takes. And being willing to work hard and not obsessively hard. That I leave for myself. I'm obsessive. Okay. Oh, by the way, here we go back to this. What have I done? Sorry about this. As you can see, I shouldn't be allowed to. You can see that the last 2 numbers don't sum up to the first number. Okay. Yes. All right. These are my 11. Yeah.
In your view, what makes a good dissertation?
Oh, what makes a good dissertation is that for me, it means that the student's proud of his or her own work, and can explain it to their parents, what they're doing. I think one of the great things you have to learn to be a successful instructor and a mentor is you have to be able to explain what your thesis is about. If you can't explain it, you probably don't know what you're doing. If you can only explain it in formulas. And I've had all these students who started off just talking in terms of formulas. And by the time I'm done with them, they don't. And so there's nobody here who's gone through the process, but I edit everything. We practice. Well, in any case, I'll talk more about that. These are my 11 PhD students who are ASA fellows. The first 4 was from when I was at the University of North Carolina. Marie Davidian is the former ASA president. Lynn Stefanski is a former JASA editor. And then the other 7 are from here. We get really good students here. CY is at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. Jeff Morris is the head of biostatistics at the University of Pennsylvania. Hua Liang is at George Washington. Vera, his last name is like 33 letters. And so he's just universally known as Vera. And luckily there's only one Vera in statistics. And he's at the University of Michigan. Yehua Li is at UC Riverside. Bo Li is at Illinois. And she's the head at Illinois right now. And Jeff Matza, I only realized when I gave this talk in November that Jeff Matza got elected to the ASA. And his thesis paper was also published in Biometrica. It was on, for those, I see a few students in my class, it was on penalized regression response. So yeah, that was great. Now, I've had 24 postdocs, and again, the math doesn't add up. But 17 of them have gone into universities. You don't generally go into do a postdoc unless you're trying to get into a university job. But 6 have gone to industry, and they've pretty much like the graduate students. They're smart and they're motivated. They already have dissertation behind them. And so you have to untrain them from some of the things they learned from their major professors, but it's easy enough to do because they want to get a job, right? And And one of the great things for me has been, I had 3 students who left their initial mentors and switched over to me. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. They basically fired their initial full professor, mentoring professor. Len Stefanski, the ASA president, ASA editor, JASA editor, was number 4, and he was one of those students. And I can't remember who number 28 is. They're just, I mean, it's not that they're just numbers. I know who these are, but I had to remember. I think that's Bowley. No, she's later. I've had 3 students who I started out as the junior advisor, and then their major professors left. One of them became psychotic, and so I've had those 3, and they all wrote. These are. I mean, 28, 29, 32, and 36 are from here, and they were terrific students. And surprisingly, I'm pretty friendly with my PhD students. I mean, never have been, only one have I ever been a really good friend of. All the rest, it's been a good professional relationship. But I don't torture my students. I want them to get out and get a job. And that's, for me, success. So that's pretty good. Okay, I'm not your typical mentor. How many of you are writing a dissertation now and you meet with your professor once a week? Okay, I hate that, right? I don't like that at all. I have never done it. I will never do it. I don't have any students now, but I never felt that was efficient, because you talk to people. I know lots of people around the country who do this, and they all complain. And now I know, sure, it doesn't do anything for you guys, but they all complain about how the students only start preparing the night before the meeting, which is a pretty natural thing to do. So everybody knows here that if my office door is slightly ajar, I don't actually leave it open except when it's freezing like it is today. Just walk in. I mean, if the door's, you can see it's not locked. That's a sign that I'm not doing anything really serious, that I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything. So I found it very, very efficient. People would come in, they'd ask a question, they'd want some advice, and I'd try and answer it. Or if not, I'd answer it the next day. And instead of having to sit around all week waiting for, to do the thing, I wanted to see progress. You're writing a dissertation. Why not show me your stuff on a regular basis? And I was notorious for wandering the halls before COVID and knocking on my students' office doors and saying, "Hey, what are you doing now?" They didn't mind. And I have been around a long time. And so I actually started doing research in the time of no email, no computer software, any of that sort of stuff. And so we sent mails. If I was on sabbatical or away, we wrote everything down. I'm just a believer in, if you write things down, you can chart your progress, as opposed to the old traditional style of writing up your thesis for publication at the end. That's, to me, a waste of time. So they'd ask me questions. I'd try and answer them. They'd ask issues that they wanted to discuss, so I tried to discuss them. I don't typically try and get involved in my students' personal lives. They're not my sons and daughters, and in any case, they don't want their major professor interfering in their personal life. But I have helped. I mean, I like this style. It works for me. There's people just wander in, and they do. Okay. And I've had, right from the start, I thought a major part of being a mentor, the most important part, is getting the student graduated. Okay, that's my charge. I'm not going to give any student a problem that they can't solve. And I usually do. You'd be surprised how often this happens. People give their student a problem they can't solve themselves. Well, that's a great way to find out if you've got Brad Efron as your PhD student, but not very good way to get a dissertation done. So, and I like to give advice. Those of you who know me at all know that I give free advice to any and all. So I collected questions over the years that have been asked of our students. And it's all A&M students stuff. And both for academic jobs and for industry jobs. And I have, those are available to A&M students. Some people, I think, has anybody used them? Has anybody seen them? I don't send them out unless I'm asked, or your advisor asks. So if they don't want my advice, or they've probably gone through the interview process a little more recently, so they know what it's like now. But it's 10 pages of single-spaced questions, and it's pretty good. People have told me that they use it, they prepare for it. My theory was that I was getting tired of students going off for their first job and then failing at it, not getting a job because they hadn't prepared. And there's an old saying it's a mystery writer named Peter Granger: failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So just prepare. It isn't that hard. And this stuff, I think, has been pretty good. My students do practice talks and they do practice interviews. I know people here do that too. My students do a lot of talks because I figure you got to learn to give a talk, no matter what your career is. If you can't tell people what you're doing, you got a problem. And I remember a very good student of ours, Changying Wang, who's now at Carroll State. The first time she gave a little talk, there was no English in her slides. It was all formulas. And so we stopped the process right there. And I said, okay, next time, no formulas, all English. And she learned it. She's a fantastic speaker now. Because she said, you don't know, you aren't born with the ability to give a technical talk. You got to practice at it and work at it, prepare. So my point was to try and get my students well prepared for interviewing, and all A&M students who want that advice are welcome to it. It really does make you more confident if you're prepared. You know, if you know what questions people are going to ask you. And I don't know, it's just the way I just thought it was a matter, not for my own edification, but why not have your students be successful? Right? Doesn't hurt. And we've done pretty well here at A&M. Now, I've got one particular bugbear, which is an English saying, meaning, oh God, I don't know what it means. So I'm interviewing somebody. I sort of stopped doing interviews because I got so frustrated. But so I'll say at the end, do you have any questions? And inevitably, I don't do interviews in the morning, never have, because I work in the morning. But they always time answer, no, I've been told everything and it's all clear. Now, how stupid can you be to answer anything like that, right? In other words, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm not interested in you or anything. And even simple questions like, what do you do? They don't ask. And now my policy is when people ask that question and I say, and you believe them? With a question mark, deliberate question mark, which is another way of saying, get out of my office. But okay. And then any of you guys want free advice, I'm happy to do that. You know, I am, yeah. Oh, yeah, you ask them you ask everybody the same questions. So you don't take just one person's saying, so what's the teaching load like? How are the computing resources? How's the IT staff? Those are simple questions. And every faculty, look, faculty members, academics like to talk about themselves, right? Have you ever noticed a shy, when they start talking about themselves, they become very relaxed. And then they think you're an interesting person. I'm serious. I'm not laughing about this. It's really true. And academics are notorious for this. And so there's lots of questions. I've got a whole bunch of them in the thing, but you can ask everybody the same questions. And sometimes you get an interesting viewpoint. One of the big questions is how soon, I have industry questions at the same time, but one question is how soon are you expected to get a grant? Well, that is a really interesting question to ask people in a department because they'll all give you different answers. It's a really quite funny thing. So in any case, any of you guys want some free advice? I'll give you free advice. And I know my students have benefited from it. I think other people do too. But if you prepare, you're just in much better because you're more self-confident. And self-confidence really comes through on an interview. And you don't just, I've had people stare at me. Just, okay, well, there we go. That was a nice interview. So I had a good major professor, a fantastic major professor. His name was Shanti Gupta. He's since passed away, but he was wonderful and he was kind and just the greatest guy I ever met. Lots of people admired him a lot. And one of the things he did is what he expected of his students depended on what he decided what their ability was. So he didn't give impossible problems. He never gave an impossible problem anyway. And the other thing I liked about him, he was the department head, but for his students, he was always available. I would go into his department head at Purdue has a formal secretary outside the office. And I would go in and say to the secretary, whose name was Norma Lucas, Norma, I'd like to see if I could talk to Professor Gupta. And I always got in on the spot, no matter what. He kicked people out of his office to talk to his students. And finally, at the end, having spent 2 years being called Mr. Carroll, he called me Ray after I did my dissertation defense. And then he said, call me Shanti. Now, I've given you, I loved it, and I did admire him. So what did I answer when he said, call me Shanti? Come on, you guys are smart. Thank you, Professor Gupta. It took me years before I could call him Shanti, until I had gotten a little established. So he's a nice guy. He was a nice guy, really helpful. And I think being available is a really good thing. I didn't have any mentoring in my first job. Absolutely none. The students in my class today, I told the story, true story, of these old senior colleagues who came in and just called me Carroll for one thing. And they said, go talk to this guy in another room. And that was my mentoring. So not every place is good at mentoring, but now the universities are trying to do a much better job. Industry does do a good job, generally. So some advice, seek out useful and caring mentors. They do exist. You'd be surprised. Well, they didn't exist in North Carolina, but in here, there's lots of people who are willing to be mentors, and the same thing all over the country that I find. Faculty members will talk to more students, more than their own students, and that's good. And you can usually find out who's the nicest faculty member, who's research active, and that's a good person to talk to. Now you got to have great collaborators. And statistics is more of a collaborative science right now. Since there were no computers when I started, I wrote a bunch of single authored papers. I think it was quite a while before I started working with somebody. these are six of my favorite colleagues. David Rupert's my best friend. He's at Cornell. Bit about him later. Peter Hall, everybody's heard of Peter Hall, right? And Peter and I were very close personal friends. And so we wrote like 20 papers together over the years. Jihong Lin is at Harvard, and she's become a statistical geneticist. She came here. She was an assistant professor, and she wrote to me. That was still in the days of writing, and said, "Are you working on this particular problem?" And I said, "Yeah, but do you want to come down here, spend a couple of weeks, and we can solve it?" And that's what she did. And so it was great. And Nilanjan Chatterjee's also a close personal friend of mine. He's a statistical geneticist now. And he's at Johns Hopkins, and he has this $5 million endowed professorship. And Mitch Gale was the president of the ASA. He's in the National Academy of Medicine. He's very famous. And Young Chen is the person I work with now a lot at the University of Pennsylvania on federated learning. They're great people, and there's the list goes there. I've had a lot of really good collaborators, and that's, I don't know, well, why I have had it. I don't know. I traveled around a lot, but I guess I'm friendly. I am friendly. So, okay. My first 3 years as an assistant professor, I was the assistant professors, and this is a true story. I have to always preface this. The faculty had a meeting, and they said, well, we have to do teaching evaluation. So we'll start by evaluating the teaching of the assistant professors. They used the word S at the end, the turn letter. And I looked around. It was a great way to make enemies. And I looked all around, and I said, so we agree, speaking for the assistant professors, we need a control group. And so we need to have the full professors also evaluated. Not very diplomatic, so, but I was mad. Well, in any case, David came, and we did 10 years of astonishing research, really productive. We did write 45 papers, and they were good papers. There wasn't a piece of trash in it at all. And we wrote 3 books together. So, you get lucky that way. Some more advice, free advice. Don't worry if your paper's going to be important. How the hell do you know? I don't. For me, it's hit or miss whether a paper's going to be important or not. I don't know. If you find out later over the years, if it gets a lot of citations. But I've had a couple of papers that I thought were trash who've turned out with 700 and 800 citations. And I've had enough papers to get tenured early here. They got no citations. And they're great. They're real theoretical, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't have any impact. And so that's not really good. So I don't know. I have no chance. I have no idea whether a paper is going to be accepted or not. I just don't know. I've been the editor of a couple of journals, and I can't tell what referees are going to say. And those of you who have gone through a referee know that referees they're just weird and random. They get up on the wrong side of the bed and they do a review. So, good thing your students will be your legacy. I'm happy with that. And this is not finally, as you see, I still got a few more slides, but you should be kind. That's the motto of most of you know that I live in Washington State in the summers, and we have a house out there. And the town is called Sequim, Washington, Sequim, and its motto is "Be kind," which is a really good thing. I mean, it doesn't hurt you, right? I mean, nobody's going to say, "Oh, I hate that guy because he's so kind," and it makes you feel better. Fair enough. But also, you never know when, and this has happened to me, you get breaks on papers. Referees say, oh, it's Ray Carroll. He's a nice guy. Well, we'll accept it. And the same thing on grants. I've had that happen on a grant before. So it doesn't I just like being kind, but it doesn't hurt. And don't go picking enemies. Because you never know, their friends are going to consider you an enemy too. So if you're going to fight with somebody, make sure you know what you're doing about it. And I generally don't do that. And I focus on what I can control. I don't focus on department politics or university politics. I can't control these administrators. I don't want to control them. So I just focus on my research and my teaching. I treat teaching very seriously, but I find it's a lot more fun to think about research and teaching than it is to worry about, oh, the administration's plans or this, that, and the other thing. It's not going to get you anywhere. It takes away, it's no fun to do if you focus on what you can't control. You're going to have failures. How many of you have had a paper rejected? Got a story about that too. My first 6 papers were rejected. Sometimes nastily. One editor said, you obviously have no talent. You should go into industry. At the time, that was considered a curse. Okay. Well, I got stubborn. That guy eventually forgot about it. He invited me to his university, and I walked in. He says, "Oh, Raymond, good to see you. Would you like some coffee and cookies?" And I was loaded for bear, but I gave up. Okay, and I got a paper accepted finally on try number 7. I have a photo of the letter, and that letter is in our safe deposit box here in College Station. It was in the journal you've never heard of. It's called Probability Theory and its Applications, but it's a German-French journal called Zeitschrift für Wahrscheinlichkeitstheorie und verwandte Gebiete. But it was paper 1. I actually did call my parents up and say, I'm getting tenure. I told that story today. I don't care. I want to get good papers that have citations. I don't care if it's in the big 4, the Annals, JASA, Series B, what's the other one? Biometric. I've got plenty of those. So I guess I'm in the situation where I can just say, oh, it's not all that a big a deal because I've got lots of them. But I consider this when you're starting out, like going to a South African camera lodge, which I do every year, and being unhappy if you don't see the big 5, which are lion, leopard, rhino, elephant, and Cape buffalo. I'm bored with elephants. Lions a little bit, leopards no, rhinos yeah no, Cape buffalo they just frighten the hell out of me, so I avoid them. I think focusing on these extraneous things as opposed to what you like to do is going to make sure you don't write any good papers, any papers. If you focus on, I got to get a paper in the Annals of Statistics, which I've had said to me, then you're never going to get a paper in the Annals of Statistics, and you're never going to get a paper in JASA or anyplace else. So there are a lot of venues for really good journals, like Journal Machine Learning Research, for example, is quite a good journal. There's lots of good journals, biostatistics, lots of them. So statistics has changed so dramatically in the 50 years I've been in the field that you need to worry. Now, this is good career advice by my buddy Nilanjan Chatterjee. Choosing a career, he took a job at the National Cancer Institute when he could have gotten a job at any university. And he went there because he liked what they were doing. He just said, I knew him as a graduate student. And so I talked to him, he said, I want to have fun. I want to, have a career that'll be enjoyable. And now he's at Hopkins, but this is a direct quote of his. And he's a close personal friend of mine too. I was Peter Hall's co-author on the first paper he got rejected. Now that is a claim to fame, isn't it? Those of you who know Peter Hall had like 800 papers. And we got this, I was in Australia at the time, and he came in and he was so angry and so appalled. And I just started laughing. And I told him it's a career goal of mine to have a paper, to have the co-author on your first rejected paper. And I've now achieved that goal. He didn't think it was funny, put it mildly. Okay. I'm 50. I've had a PhD in April, it'll be 50 years. You can't compare yourself to my career. I've been in the business for 50 years. I mean, heavens, if I do nothing, I've got a lot more papers than anybody else does. And I think if you do, it's 50 years, at two great universities. I should have lots of accomplishments. And I think if you compare yourself, if you compare your research career to somebody else, that's just going to make yourself miserable. Because how can you compete with Peter Hall in theoretical statistics? You can't. How can you compete with Brad Efron in important methodological statistics? You can't. So why bother? Just enjoy what you're doing. I've seen people consumed with thinking they want to compete with these people who are outliers. I mean, I have had a lot of papers, and so people wonder how I could do that. Well, I wonder it myself, but just don't do it. It's a waste of time. You can't control that you don't write as many papers as Peter Hall. Nobody ever has. And so I just decided to write papers with him because then they'd get published. Okay. And this is Peter Hall quotes. He was interviewed in Statistical Science. You can read it. Peter was a very theoretical person. And you can see this in the first. He calls himself a problem solver, and he meant solving mathematical problems. And he was truly fantastic at it. I watched him write a really good paper in 2 days. The whole paper, by hand with the equation numbers, etc. One of them has 800 citations. It's with me though. And then he liked it, and I like this himself. I don't compete with my co-authors, right? I want to work with them. They're fun. And you don't want to work with somebody you're doing the same things on, usually. Rupert and I are an exception. But if you work with people who have non-overlapping interests, both people benefit and will help make a better paper, I think. So, and this is, I like this one. Melangen is this is, by the way, pick out caring collaborators, not just collaborators. He didn't have to say this, right? I mean, I am fairly much older than him, for 30 years, but okay, lucky to meet my long-term collaborator, Raymond Carroll, whose deep knowledge of diverse areas of statistics and intoxicating energy for working on new problems continue to inspire me. And I read that and I thought, he was lucky because he's brilliant. So, and this is the kind of nice thing. It's called being kind, it's paying a compliment. It doesn't hurt you. It makes the other person feel good and makes you look good too. So and then this is Rupert and me at Rupert's. Both Peter Hall and David Rupert are about 6 inches taller than me, but that isn't hard to do. It's many of you are too. And so that was at a retreat that Harvard put on, Harvard Biostat. And then this is me and Peter at UC Davis for his 50th or 60th birthday anniversary. Big man. They're both big guys. And this is what I said at the Jeremy Taylor Mentorship Award. I was actually really pretty thrilled with that. And I sometimes get the impression that I'm the last man standing, because a lot of my friends have passed away already. And so they got to give these awards to somebody. Why not the last guy there? And then thank you for inviting me. Actually, Valeria was kind enough not say that I invited myself. And, but I appreciate seeing you guys and getting a chance to do the thing I do best, and it's talk. Thanks.
Time for questions. So,
During your career, did you find yourself having to see how mentees or people still come in?
Collaborators, me. Oh, mentees, no, the people came to me. You want to seek it out, but one of the things I think it's productive for an assistant professor to do is to mentor a student with somebody more senior, somebody who you get along with. Because there's certain things that happen. Look, I've been really lucky in my graduate students. And these students at A&M are really good. Sometimes they have emotional problems, some other problems, but it's always nice. Sometimes students just disappear. You know, I had that count of 20 plus 25 does not equal 48. They'll just disappear. And I've had younger colleagues just get all excited, all really depressed by that. And how could they do this? Well, they did it. I mean, so what? So yeah, but I think it's nice to do your first one mentoring. Yeah.
So give me advice or tips on not maybe finding a collaborator, maybe in another field, if you want to work on maybe want to apply a paper with them, but actually like initiating that relationship. You can just directly reach out to them, or do you?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I've never been successful that way. What I've been successful at, I've traveled, I don't travel a lot. And I go visit universities and people. So my collaborations here have been a combination of people coming and asking, what do you do? What do you do is actually a really good question. You meet somebody, if you'll see this, it'll happen to you. You'll get into maybe a grant proposal or something with a bunch of people, and then you meet somebody who you don't know from Adam. And despite what I act like, I'm extremely shy among non-statisticians. And so I went up to this woman who was a biologist, so it was a toxicology grant. And I just went up to her and said, what do you do? Okay, that's a good question. Every scientist will want to answer you. This is really the fun thing about it. Every research person wants to tell you what they do. It's quite remarkable. So what she told me about was basic molecular biology problem. But she started drawing the colonic crypt. Our colon has these little indentations there where the cells live. And she started drawing it and where the cells were and what, at different stages of the process. And I was smart enough to realize, hey, that's what we now call functional data analysis, which is why I got into it so early, is because I had this person just explain the paper, the problem. And that was really great. Two of my students, Jeff Morris at Penn and Yehua Lee at UC Riverside, who were both students from here, they worked on that problem. I wrote 20 papers with these nutritionists. So it just happened, So you got to be lucky, but I was out there looking for problems. And I was willing to change fields too. That's one of the great things about statistics is you can change fields. I mean, you've got a couple of faculty members here. You've got one a little bit older, not as old as me, who's changed his field at least twice since he started his research. And everybody changes their field in statistics at one point or another. You just get bored with your thesis topic. Or you should get bored with your thesis topic. And you will. Yeah. So again, long answer to a good question. Yeah, Patricia.
Some experience like mentoring a postdoc. Like say the postdoc already graduated from a PhD program. The distinct is on another topic. It's related but on another topic. In the postdoc stage, the student, the person might want to continue his PhD research. But you have another, the grad supported on another different research.
Yeah, so postdocs are particularly difficult because they're only funded for 2 or 3 years, depending on the level of funding. And most people want them to work, I would want them to work on things I'm interested in. It turns out that I'm almost interested in everything, so it's not so hard a deal with me. But there's a startup cost for the postdoc to learn a new field, right? So you've got to make sure that you help them get over that startup cost. You can't just say, go work on this problem. That's a disaster. That's going to be a disaster. But you can say, well, here's a problem. Give them an easy one for, it's the same thing I do with graduate students. Give them a relatively easy one first, and then they'll start learning your field, and then they'll go from there. That's how I've done it. And I've had some very good postdocs, and I've had one failure. One terrible bust. But no, it's harder though. You can't expect them to become all of a sudden expert in your field. I mean, you've got a pretty technical field that you work in. You know, Patricia, right? Dr. Ding. So you can't expect them to know what you know. And it's very discouraging to be for a student or a postdoc. And I was a student once. It's discouraging to get started with no advice. I was in that situation by choice, and my major professor said, sure, go ahead. And that was great, but you got to get started. You have to get them started. So your obligation as a postdoctoral advisor is to give them things they can work on right now, not over the course of 4 years or so. They have to write enough papers to get a job. And to make it a fun experience for everybody, you know, so you can get papers as the postdoctoral mentor. And don't give them the hardest problem you've got, because my problem's a lot easier. Your problems, Raymond and Jesus's, are a lot harder than stuff I did. So.
I have the last question. So you said that time has changed. It's very hard to compare. So what advice can you give the current PhD students in the new time how to succeed in their PhD later?
I think you should work on something you want to do and not aim. What I see is people, and that's not here, people working on a problem because they think it will get published in some fancy journal and not because they're interested in it. And I think you got to work on stuff that you're interested in. Really, I mean, I love the stuff I work on. I've loved every one of them, but some of them less than the others. But no, you got to work on what you want to work on. And this is true in industry too, you know. I know the pharma industry very well. And some people like working on clinical trials. And other people hate working on clinical trials. And I had a research student here who got into clinical trials and realized he hated it. And so he left the industry, that particular industry, and went into a new job. So yeah, I don't think, and then if you like the problem, it'll get published somewhere. I also have another saying, every paper has a home. You just have to find it. And it's true. It really is true. I've gone from paper journal to journal too. It's part of the game. But that.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Carroll.